Let's commit this time to God again. Father, in this confusing and changing time, all the more we need to hear your voice. So Lord, as we wait upon you this Saturday morning, speak to us. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I think this is really a special time in history. I think none of us could have foreseen COVID-19 and the extent to which it has changed our lives. But I think this is not all a bad thing, because now that we have to press the pause button on all sorts of things, it forces us to rethink and to reflect again. What should we do? Or what is really normative? If things were just on as usual and we're just charging ahead with our lives, and in Singapore we're all very busy, lots of things to do, we may not, in fact, I don't think we will take the time to reflect. But now we have no choice. Times are different, and it could be a gift for us to step back and to think what should be. And one of the key questions we are facing now is, how do we do church? I think when the phase 1 started, when we are not allowed to assemble at all, I think that's when we all had to quickly shift to online meetings. I think that was strange. I think we were so used every Sunday to dress up, go to church and sing. Now suddenly we have to be at home and encounter church through live streaming. And all churches now suddenly become experts overnight how to do computer stuff. Last time they didn't have to, now everybody had to. But of course, time has passed. We are now into phase 2, and we have now some element of coming back to on-site worship. Although it's still very strange, you still have limited numbers. You have to apply for a ticket, and you sit some distance apart from each other, and you cannot sing out loud. And the guy will speak, and you listen, and then you go back, and you are not encouraged even to talk to each other. But you do have this choice now. You have a choice of being at home. You have a choice of going on site. And really, no one can force you. No? In fact, we found many of the churches we know, although the numbers have been quite growing all the time, but the numbers of people actually coming back for on-site has not been that hot. So you can have 50 people, only 30 show up or something like that. So obviously, people are still thinking, what should I do? Now, as you yourself, Gabriel, has shared, sometimes it may just be convenient to encounter the worship through some streaming worship service. I can wear my sarong and lie in bed and watch my on-stream service. Nobody knows. And then, a good sermon. I can sing out loud in my bedroom. And then maybe that's better than, after all, if I dress up, go to church also, I have to wear mask, cannot sing out loud, just hear sermon only. So should I really do that? Although I must share straight away that as someone who preaches, I have actually enjoyed going back to preaching before live people. It was very strange to tape your sermon. You don't know whether people are laughing at your jokes or preaching. Then even streaming kind of sermons, okay. But now going back to preach to real people, to hear them laugh or to hear them not happy with you or whatever, at least got some kind of real-time interaction. I've enjoyed that. And also you steal a few conversations with some close friends in church. I'm not supposed to talk too much, but I don't care. You can steal some conversations. And that's really been enjoyable. But really, what should we do? We don't know how this will continue. I think more and more people probably will be allowed to go back to on-site worship. The numbers may increase. But I think for the foreseeable future, still cannot sing out loud. I still must sit in a certain distance. So we are this strange time that, should I just do streaming worship? Should I go back? Should I do some mixture? I think the starting point for me is not just what is convenient and what I would like to do. I think we must go back to what the Bible teaches about what church means. So this is my point. It's not a question of convenience, what I like, but hey, a starting point must be the Word of God, and what does the Word say about what the church is meant to be. So I'll just run through some basic biblical teaching about church and then see how that impacts on our choices. So those of you who have heard me speak before will know that I feel very strongly that human beings are meant to be relational beings. I always point out the first negative we ever encounter in scripture is Genesis 2:18. It's not good for man to be alone. And it's the first negative. Everything before that is always is good, very good. So when you encounter the first negative, you sit up and take notice. And this is Genesis 2:18, God's own statement. It's not good for man to be alone. This is a time when there's no sin in the picture. Adam had perfect access to God, but still not enough. So it sounds sacrilegious to say that it's not enough to have God only, but it's a matter of respecting how God has made us. We are made for two key relationships, with God and with other human beings. Hence the entry of Eve into the life of Adam, and Adam and Eve are the first community. And this is normal human life. Two people who are equal but different, loving each other and sharing their separate strengths together, serving God. So this becomes actually a model for human relationships in general. We're meant to relate to other human beings who are equal to us but different from us. And together we are meant to care for each other and share our different strengths to do God's work. So this is a model of what human life is meant to be, not just in marriage. Because we know, like Paul, even Jesus, they were single, but they had many good friends. So this is a model of human life and not just married life. But we also know, and this is so key, that sin destroys relationship. So the moment that sin entered the picture, we see Adam blaming Eve. God, the woman you brought me, caused me to sin. And by the next generation, we see Cain take the rock and whack the head of Abel. And this break in human relationships is seen everywhere in human society. You look out, see between different races, different social groupings. Every day on the computer, we see so much evidence of human relational brokenness. So one of the things that Christ did when he came to usher in the good news of the kingdom actually is to restore human relationships. And we see this like Ephesians 2, he has now made one humanity, broken down the walls from Jews and Gentiles. That's basically walls between everyone, that there should be this new people, so the new relational life. And in Romans, we find this lived out. We see the church as highly relational. In Romans 12, we are members of each other. So this is something that tells us that we are not beings that live in isolation. No, we are meant to live life, and surely the new creation would recover this aspect that human beings were meant to be. We are meant to live in deep relationship with each other. And indeed, there is this strong sense that not only do we live in deep love with each other, each of us have different things to contribute to the common life. That means I need you and you need me. This is not dependence, but interdependence. God purposely give different people different gifts, different strengths, so that none of us can go through life as some isolated, super anointed person. It's a community where I have certain strengths to contribute to you, and you have strengths that I need. So when we choose to live life in isolation, this is a violation of what it means to be God's people. This is based on theology. Hence, Romans 12 actually, of course, comes from the book of Romans, which is a key book of theology. We know that. But in most of Paul's letters, the first half will be on theology. The second half is how we live out the right theology. And clearly, so many instructions of how we live together as a community in the second half of Romans. And I want to say one main point now, that the word church in the New Testament, ecclesia, always refers to people and not to a building. I don't know how to say this. I've said this many times in my life, but it's still, I want to go to church. Your church open or not? I said, hey, hello, church is people. There were no buildings specified for church use until the 3rd century onwards. So the first 3 centuries in New Testament times, when you say church, ecclesia, we are referring to a community, people. And you can say it's a church building. I think that's fair enough. It's a building where we carry out our church life to some degree. But church is always people. So when you say, my church is now open again, you say, what? Hello? What? The church building, you mean? Church building. The church has always existed. You have always been in this community. Whether you have been a good community member or not is a different point. Because good community member means we're living in a relationship where we love each other and where we contribute whatever strengths we have to strengthen others and others we are also humble to receive what others have for us. I find that there are at least 24 one another commands in the New Testament. Love one another, pray with one another, accept one another, forgive one another. There are 24 unique one another commands. In terms of actual one another statements, there are about 59. But in terms of unique statements, there are at least 24 one another commands in New Testament. Therefore, we cannot live out. We cannot live out the New Testament life, normal New Testament life, without being in deep relationship, at least with some other believers. Cannot, impossible. So whether it is on-site, online, to me, that's a separate question. The question is, how do we do this? How do we live out this deep relationship of giving and receiving? That is the first question. Not which one is more convenient, which one is better, but how do we actually do this? And so we see in Romans, we have some clue, because in Romans 12, we see that we are meant to be members of each other. We are meant to contribute our unique giftings to help each other. So how do they do this? Because really in big meetings, and surely in meetings where we have to wear masks and keep distance, how do we do relationship and ministry? So we see in the New Testament, in Romans itself, in Romans 16:5, it talks about greet the church that meets in your house. Greet the ecclesia that meets in your house. So we now know that the New Testament church life was actually 30, 40 people meeting in a home. Now, I'm not saying we should now return to house churches. That's not my point. But the point is that we must find some way to recapture this relational and mutual dynamic. How do we do this? These are the more pressing questions to me than on-site, online, whatever. How do we actually live out the church life that God commands us to have? That is the primary and prior question than what form it takes. And in fact, we see in 2 John 12, where John says there's some things I want to tell you, but I do not want to do with ink and paper. Some things I can only tell you face to face. Now, of course, this statement itself is in a letter, and a letter is not a face-to-face experience. He wrote a letter. But in that letter, he expresses that a certain relationship that comes only when we communicate and connect. To me, that makes sense because God has made us as embodied beings. We're not just floating ideas floating around in cyberspace. We actually have bodies. In fact, being able to see your faces, I connect with you, even that better than just exchanging notes. Even seeing your face gives me some degree of engagement that I don't have if I just engage with your ideas. How much more we are meant to be in the same space at the same time, where we can cry together or laugh together or hug each other if you're allowed to, hug each other or whatever. So not just but how can we actually connect with our bodies as well? So greet one another with a holy kiss. To us, it's kind of a strange practice, but in the Middle East, now they will kiss on. It's a cultural expression of intimacy and connection, which involves the body. So now we may shake hands or hug or whatever, but it seems that the best, the one key way we connect actually is with our bodies. This is how we are meant to be. We are embodied beings. So we are meant to be a people. The church is people, not buildings. And I don't care. I will keep on maintaining this. Number two, we are meant to be a community where we love each other and care for each other. Remember the Acts, it was so mind-boggling that people got extra land, go and sell the land and give money to the apostles to give to the poor. This is mind-blowing. Mind-blowing then, mind-blowing now. But this deep love and community between people. Then we see how we are meant to give and receive. We are not independent beings. We are interdependent. We need each other. There are things that I need from you, there are things that you need from me. That's why of yourself with serious, sober judgment. Some of you think that we are very capable, and we don't need people. But have you thought maybe people need you? So okay, I feel independent. I've got my life is complete. I don't really need anyone. I don't need to go to church. To me, this is a heck of a selfish way of thinking. You may feel you don't need others, which may actually not true. Actually, you may need others in ways you don't know. But how about the fact that others need you? No, we live in community. Maybe today I need you, tomorrow you need me. But this is normal Christian life. And to do this, we realize we cannot live as strangers, because as strangers, how can we love each other if we do not know each other's needs? How can we contribute to each other's lives if I do not know your gifts, you do not know my gifts? So again, the presupposition is that normal Christian life is strongly relational. And we see how the New Testament did it was in groupings in house, 30, 40 people in a home that meet on a regular basis. And we see in 2 John 12, there are certain means of connecting which is not personal, like letters, and today, Zoom and whatever, but there are certain quality of meeting that comes only face to face. In fact, one of the studies that has surprised me recently, a survey of those communities, which generation complained about loneliness. So one generation that complained about loneliness was senior citizens. Now, I totally get that. I also, white hair. So because our health now not so strong, we need more energy, or we may find it difficult to drive out or to go out. And not only that, our peers begin to pass away. So you tell me about seniors being lonely, I can get it. But the other statistic, and this is a BBC survey or what, that shocked me was young adults. Young adults complain about loneliness. I said, but then you got 1,000 friends on Facebook. What? I mean, what? So maybe the point being that there is real connection with virtual connecting. So I'm not knocking that. But clearly it doesn't seem to replace face-to-face. Because now, if most of the time you connect only online, it actually also takes away time from actual physical connection. That's one of my theories. I have to study this more. Why are young adults complaining about loneliness when they are connected all the time online? And maybe there is something in what John said in 2 John 12. There are certain things can only happen face to face. Maybe lah, I don't know. So really, this need to be in relationship with others, and how loneliness actually leads to depression. You see how many young adults complain about depression, or even the growing experience of suicides among the young. So we need to take this thing seriously, this need for connecting. So then we go back to the question of how can we do church today? On site, no, I'm not knocking that at all. If can go back on site, for me, even to catch a bit of conversation, maybe not allowed, I don't care, we catch a bit of conversation with some friends. It's so nice to see them again, to see their face. Are they happy? Are they sad? No, there are certain physical cues that even Zoom very hard to catch. That's why Zoom is so tiring, because you're trying very hard to catch the physical cues. And on the screen, it's much harder. You got to work much harder. And Zoom meetings are more 30 people, you're trying to catch what are the physical cues that gives you some insight into how they are feeling. But face-to-face, we can do that much easier. So we have been back to a few on site, and we really enjoy this. And for me, like I said, as a preacher, I really am happy standing before people and preaching the word again. It's so much energizing as compared to taping a sermon or even preaching on Zoom. But clearly there is a place for technology, because we are doing this today now, not face-to-face. So I'm not knocking all this. Then online, my main concern about online streaming worship is that it becomes passive. We're just there enjoying the worship, or not, as the case may be. I'm here, they ask you to stand up. I'm in my sarong in my room, I don't want to stand up, it's okay. Then they will be preaching a sermon, we listen, and they give you announcements. But I find it's a very passive posture. Remember, the heart of Christianity is loving one another, which is a verb, love, contributing to each other's life, which are verbs. But sitting down in a streaming worship, at most you get is some degree of inspiration and maybe some instruction. If the sermon is okay, you get some instruction. But it lends itself to a passive understanding of the Christian life. I just am there to absorb a worship. So if that's what you aim for in the long run, it can lead to a passivity in our Christian life. We're just there to learn or to hear or to enjoy a worship, but we are not actually participating. It's very hard to have this kind of mutuality in this kind of online streaming worship. But I think using things like Zoom for cell groups is another matter. Now, I've had a number of my small groups which I do on Zoom, and that has been actually quite good, actually, because that is conversations. We're actually checking on each other, how are you living out your Christian faith? So there is some degree of encouragement to living out your Christian faith. I must tell you, to be frank, I'm an old man, and when this whole thing started and I was forced to go on Zoom, I was screaming and shouting. Hey, I believe in embodied connection. I must do Zoom. What the heck is Zoom? So I'm an old man. So it took me a long time to even get used to Zoom. But after I began to get used, I said, actually, not bad. Because sometimes people actually are more willing to share things on Zoom that they wouldn't share face to face. And I saw it became, so if it's just listening to an on-site, online service alone, that can be helpful for getting some learning and all that. But in terms of our lived experience, it's very passive, my fear. Whereas Zoom meetings with small groups, I found that has its own value. I mean, these are people already committed to living out their faith. These are some of my mentoring groups. So it's not a matter that they are passive, they are already living out their faith, but we can't meet face to face, so we meet online. And that has been a very positive experience. Although on the whole, I still find myself more tired after a Zoom meeting than a face to face. I don't know why. I'm going to be very tired after this. So that is. The other things that we can do is meet up in small groups, because we still can meet in groups of 5. So I said, why don't you do that? Now in phase 2 can be in groups of 5. So some cell groups got 15 people, subdivide into groups of 5, 3, and meet up and say, how are you doing? Where are you hurting? How can I invest in your life? How can to love and good deeds? So I don't see why, instead of rushing very hard to make an excellent on-site service, many churches now very consumed with how to make the best on-site service. I said, to what degree have you capitalized on your mind? You can meet in 5 people now, or even 5 people to your house. Say your house got 10 people, there's 15 people, 5 people visit you. So I don't see many churches actually maximizing on the micro groups, the groups of 5, which allows us to have that, that kind of face-to-face connecting I talked about. Yeah, so I think, again, I'm not knocking on site or online or what, but I think that if the heart of Christianity is indeed highly relational and personal, I don't think we have worked harder to see how we can do micro community meetings. With something like FES and GCF should be able to do very well. Small groups are part of the heart of our culture. Why can't we do this more? So I don't want to go on this big debate or on-site or online. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. And I'm not against either, but I'm just saying that we should, if online, then we should do more Zoom small groups. And if we can meet 5 people at a time, we should see how we can encourage our churches and para churches to maximize our micro communities. And going forward, and then I will very happy pass the time to my dear wife. Going forward, I think you will probably, let's say if normalcy comes, sometimes it feels like so long, for maybe 2022 before normalcy comes. I suspect we can't go backwards. I think it'll be some combination of big meetings, small groups, and online connections. I think we now see there's some value in online connections. There's some value even in teaching online. We now can teach people normally we cannot reach one of that. So we have now gone into another era where we are much better able to maximize online connecting. I don't think that we will go backwards on that. So a lot of teaching, instruction, even mentoring can happen online. But we go back again to our big groups where we can actually sing out loud and connect with our brothers and sisters on Sunday. Our cell groups maybe can now be more healthy because we have trained ourselves to do more micro subgroupings or whatever. So going forward, I think it'll be some combination. I don't think, and it shouldn't be the same as before. But again, I end by what I started. What does church mean? Church is community, church is relational, church is mutual. So instead of debating which one is easier, which one is harder, we talk about what expressions of church life will allow us to do these things better. Or part of church ministry. You can apply this to our FES, GCF work as well. Because finally, the two loves that we're supposed to be guided by is love God and love neighbor. Again, love is a verb. In the Bible, love is always a verb. So what context can we do this better? Online, on-site, in micro communities? How can we love God and love neighbor? It's nothing about just convenience or what I prefer, but how do we become the people that God wants us to be? So I talk a lot, but it's my dear wife who does a lot of typical living. So I pass the time to my beloved wife.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so I wanted to say that the title of this session is virtually together. And we all think of virtually as being online. But actually, if you look at the dictionary, there's another meaning for virtually. So in this sentence, the disease destroyed virtually all the vineyards in Orange County. Virtually there means almost, nearly all. So in a way, when we talk about being virtually together, we're almost together. So the church, as in the large community of people, is nearly together. We're not fully together because we can't all meet together, but should that stop us from still meeting some people? So as Gabriel said earlier, we should look for those with needs around us. And that is so true. And as Suyin also said, in Genesis, we're shown how two people with very different abilities and strengths come together to bless the rest of creation, actually. So how do we come together to bless the community? Personally, I found, being an introvert, I found phase one calming because it allowed me to legitimately withdraw within and also gave me an opportunity to draw closer to God. Okay, that's another story. Anyway, what happened was, even in phase one, we realized there were many needs around us. And me being who I am, if there are needs, I want to help to meet those needs. But I was rejected at every point, I was too old. Okay, people were concerned. So every time we offered to do something with the more organized groups, people would say, yeah, okay, I'll check and then I'll get back to you and let you know. Then invariably, by the time they get to checking and letting us know, oh, the slots are all filled up. I have a sneaky suspicion it's because Suyin and I fall within the seniors age group. But so again and again, this happened. And recently, it was reinforced again to me that I'm old because I was at the supermarket checkout line and I suddenly heard someone calling auntie, auntie. And I turned around and it was a man who looked way older than I look. So yes, the reality has sunk in. I am old. When an old man calls me auntie, auntie, then I know okay lah, end of the line. Anyway, so what happened was, because we couldn't participate in most of the organized things, we then looked around to see what are the areas that we can possibly serve in. So then we found that there was this desperate need to help those who were caught in the transition, for like Malaysians especially. And this is a group that's particularly close to my heart. I'm married to one. My family of origin actually is from Malaysia. So when we found that there was this group of people who were trapped in Singapore and who had nowhere to go, then we realized that there was a way that we could help. So we tagged on to someone way younger than us who, through his deep love for God and for his fellow men, started something called Homeless Hearts of Singapore. So through him, we were able to, in an ad hoc way, go out to look for the homeless, to give out masks, to give out hand sanitizers, to also try and connect them to organizations that could house them. And then also I discovered that there was a transit center, something called Transit Point at Margaret Drive, who were housing people precisely in that kind of situation who had nowhere to go. And in recent times, we have found that there is a group of people who are delivering meals to the elderly, called Meals on Wheels. And that's what we're going to do next. My point is, we should look for those around us with needs, and we can do something about it. You know, the Bible tells us that we are saved for good works, right? Not by our good works. So if we, by grace, have been saved through faith, then we are called to go out there and be Christ's hands, feet, heart, eyes, whatever, to those in need. I have been guilty during circuit breaker of binge watching, whether videos or reading all sorts of things online, and I sort of told myself I had a legitimate excuse to do this. But then when it came to the point where I started to look for areas of need, and I discovered how many needs are there that are not met, and that all of us can be helping to meet. Then I realized it's a matter of prioritizing our time, right? And as the worship song earlier said, may our kindness set them free. And it's so true. If that 2 hours we spend binge watching a serial or playing a computer game, I'm not saying any of this is bad in itself, because we all need downtime, but I'm saying, can we prioritize some of that time to go meet someone, to go help someone? And now that we can meet in groups of 5, what's to stop us meeting to encourage one another? After all, we're told to stir one another up to love and good works, right? Not neglecting to meet together, but encouraging one another and being a blessing. So yes, COVID-19 has turned a lot of things upside down. It has resulted in a lot of us becoming passive, as Suin said. It's also resulted in a lot of people rising up and doing many good things. Are we just only going to read about them? Or are we going to put our hands on the plow and also help? The choice is yours. What can you do to help? So my life verse is Micah 6:8. And I just want to read this to you so that you can be reminded again what God requires of us. He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. These are all verbs, action words that should inspire us and stir us up to action. Okay, that's all I have.
Yeah. So we have a question from Ian. So Ian asked, COVID aside, so not thinking about the COVID situation, how can we encourage people to have a more embodied perspective with regards to the worship gathering? Yeah. So I think some of the keynotes, like encouraging people.
Answer first.
Yeah.
Because Bernice has been a worship leader and very much involved in worship for a long time. Let me Bernice can answer.
I will probably give you one facet of the answer, and then Suin will fill in. I think it's important to remember that when we come together to worship, We are worshiping God, but we're worshiping together. So currently in most churches, we may have a segment where we welcome people, or we the more liturgical ones will share the peace with each other and all that. That allows for some lateral engagement, but generally the focus is on God, rightly so, but also on the stage. So for me, what has been useful in some of the, okay, so Suyen and I go to a lot of different churches, right? So we have a more drone view of things. And in some churches, they have actually factored in a segment in the service, in the whole worship service, where people engage with those around them. And they actually have mini discussions, maybe just immediately after the service. This may not be possible in a huge church, but I have actually seen it done in fairly large churches with pews, which don't exactly encourage comfortable turning around and talking to one another, but it can be done. So perhaps there is a possibility for more churches to have interactions mid-service, so that it's not just come, focus on what's on stage, receive, go home. But we also talk to one another. Okay, so right now, maybe it's not possible because we're not supposed to even sit close to each other, but looking ahead, and I think it's, as someone said, this is a margin for contemplation, for thinking through. So let's plan ahead. Why don't we factor in time for people to engage with one another, maybe immediately after the sermon? It may not always be comfortable, especially if you have a lot of newcomers, but it need not be deep theological discussions. It could also be, did something in that sermon touch you? And there's no forcing people to say something, but as this happens week after week, I think people begin to get into the groove. And it's also a nice way for newcomers to see the church connecting, because we always welcome newcomers, and then after that they are shunted into some corner where they're welcomed officially by the welcome team and all that. But in terms of the ebb and flow of the life of a church, of the people, they don't really get that much engagement. So for me, that would be one way to do it. And Suyin will tell you about an interesting service we attended where before communion, the pastor said something. Over to you, Suyin.
Yeah, this is an interesting experience. Our first visit to a black church in America. And during the Lord's Supper time, although we're not quite hot with the mini cup and the little bread on top, we're not hot with that, but they did that. But before they enter into the Lord's Supper, they said, you don't eat the Lord's Supper with strangers. Please take the time to turn around to everybody around you and introduce yourself and just say hi to each other. And this was not rushed. It's not that just perfunctory, then ha ha ha, then go. They actually took time, and maybe our black friends are very communal, so they will be talking, pray, whatever, for 10, 15 minutes. This is not a rush thing. And then they went on to the Lord's Supper. And the tagline was, you don't take the Lord's Supper with strangers. So I think there are various things I think of. Maybe, I don't think we can, for most churches, go back to the house church or what. But then again, I will argue that there must be clarity of the purpose of big meeting and small meeting. Small meeting is where we live out the faith. It's not just a backup to the main meeting. And the main service is for inspiration and instruction and to see ourselves as a wider body. In fact, I think small groups, sometimes we end up meeting with people who are just like us. This is for sure in campus meetings. Whereas the larger group, you see old, young, whatever. Living reminder that not everybody in the kingdom is exactly like us. So I do see value in that that large gathering. But I think often what has not happened is that we don't educate people as to the purpose of the different parts of the service. What is the singing about? What is the giving about? What's the Lord's Supper about? So after a while, people just do it because it's what they normally do. Education, especially for new believers and visitors, then they will be more engaged because they know, why am I singing? Why am I giving? After a while, most churches, they assume you know, and then we just run through the thing, bro. But I think periodic reminders and education of the purposes of the different parts of the Sunday worship will help more heart engagement. I know why I'm doing this. Why am I giving? Why am I contributing? So this is one of my things. Often, especially for new believers or visitors, I think they blur. What is this about? Nobody knows. I think we don't often look from the perspective of visitors or even our regular members who then do this because it is what they've always been doing. And once you go into this kind of routine, you lose the engagement already. You're just doing it because it's what you used to do. So I think periodic teaching is important. The other thing I would argue is that you should choose songs that everybody can sing one. Some of these songs actually are performance songs, very high key, funny. Then the regular singer try to sing, cannot, they just keep quiet. They cannot participate because this music actually may be meant for choir, for a specialized worship team or whatever. But for congregational singing, I think the expectation is these are songs that people are familiar with. It's a key that they can enter into so that they can actually sing. Otherwise, the song's very sweet and beautiful, but actually the way it's structured, the keys in which it is sung, the regular fellow cannot sing one. Then I worry. Nowadays, worship service, you just sing the song that is the next Bethel or Hillsong about boom. Whether this is actually a song theologically correct, whether people can enter into, I'm not sure to what degree are we discerning this. Idea being congregational involvement. You want to go real drastic, I have churches who on Sundays actually meet in their house groups, not in the main worship. But one Sunday a month, they meet as a big group. This is more radical because they see the small group as the primary worship unit. So maybe there are 20, 30 people in the house. They will worship, share their life, eat a meal together. Then once a month, they gather as a large group. But this is quite radical. Don't quote me. But so these are various ways. But at the very least, we should teach people what are the meaning of the different parts of the liturgy. We should be choosing songs and things that people can enter into easily. Doesn't mean we don't periodically teach new songs. That's not my point. But kind of songs, theologically sound, and the music style that most people can sing, and therefore they can sing out loud, because congregational singing is participatory, not listening to some super music out there. These are my... so we can't go back. I think we will still have our main services, but at least there's some clarity. What is the purpose of big group, small group, the purpose of the different parts of the large group worship. At the very least, we can do that.
Yeah. So just to cap that off, right? Recently I also been I think when we hear some of these things, I feel like, oh, but the churches won't change like immediately, that kind of thing. Like we will not swap pews for round plastic chairs which are more easy to turn around to meet people. Like that's not things not going to change overnight. But I feel like for those of us who are here, like not to lose hope, because change won't happen unless we start thinking about change. So at least we all keep these thoughts in mind and be more open. So we might be more open to change next time, constructive change. We have one more question here. Song Yu asks, are micro communities formed organically with like Christians taking initiative, or should such a structure be set up by leadership of the church, or maybe a combination of both? What kind of culture or environment best encourage such micro communities to be formed and sustained?
Well, again, I will share something. Then I let my beloved wife, who actually has practiced all these things. I talk a lot only, but she's the one who's a practitioner. Again, I would say that each context and each church will be different. I find it, I hesitate to give some kind of definitive pronouncement because each context is different. The starting point must be conviction, biblical conviction of why this is important. So it's not just the flavor of the week. especially in present context of COVID, we teach clearly why this micro communities is a key way to live out our faith. So if you don't have clear conviction, even your point about how people are find it very hard to change, the change has to be motivated by clear biblical conviction. It's not, otherwise it's very fun to go and change again, another style. So if it's just a matter of style or that, and everybody takes, I know I find it very hard to change. It takes a lot of energy to change, so there must be clear conviction why this is happening. So whether it's on top or whether it happens organically, the organic one I think will happen anyway lah. And for me, some of these micro communities are people maybe from different churches. I have my FES friends, they're from different churches. We meet once a month, and actually there's some value in micro communities with people not from the same church, where we can encourage one another. If it's a church-based one, I just met some chap who said that my cell group, so you know my small book on spiritual friendship 3-1. Our cell group had 15 people. We divided them into 5 3-1, so they are now they're thriving. So for everyone may be happy lah, because that this was on top. The CG leader talked to the group. Of course, it consulted the group. Now we cannot meet as 15 people. Can we have 5 3-1s? 3-1 means 3 people, 2 hours once a month. It's just a catching. And they have done that. And so he so excited to report to me that this worked for them. But I know this may not work for every group. Some people don't want to meet. I always find that as I shared earlier, our culture is very private. Some people are quite happy to be in a big group where they're anonymous. Some people prefer that. You ask them to go and share their heart. I don't know how to do this. Hey, I'm Chinese. I don't share heart. So the cultural blockages, as well as partly I think is sin. Sin makes us private. Sin makes us hide. So it's not so simple to top down and command people to do micro group. Some will respond, some will not. But then the ministry, in the end of the day, we work with those who want to be worked with. But again, it has to be preceded with clear teaching and maybe some pilot groups first. Often people will see others do. My wife say, you show, don't tell. You see, hey, these fellas meet three, four of them. They meet once a month or once a week. I see them actually, it helps them to thrive and flourish. And so maybe we can try that next round or what. So sometimes it can start organically, and that will happen anyway. Those of us who are relational will always look for 2, 3 friends to meet one. And some may be guided, guided from top down, but then there has to be with deep sensitivity of where each person is ready, what they're. But my dear wife has gone through many kinds of small groups, so I asked her to share.
I have.
You told me one word.
These are just cell groups. Personally, I like the idea of micro communities sprouting out everywhere and people doing life together, people finding energy from the group, finding purpose, and also encouragement, affirmation. In a large service, who affirms you in the pew? You need the small group for that kind of encouragement and affirmation. But I also want to sound a word of warning, because whether it is organically done or whether it is top down, you do have to have a baseline theological underpinning. I think it can get quite dangerous if people begin to start all sorts of groups where there isn't a strong Bible-based rationale and guideline for what is being done. And are there people who maybe are a few steps ahead who can help these groups when they come into a situation where they can't cope? They don't know how to cope, or they don't have the theological kung fu to help. Then do they have people that they can go to? Because you could end up with a lot of hurt and burnt people as well with micro communities. So we have to go into this judiciously, almost like a wedding enter into it, with full preparation and guidance, and also have recourse to help. Okay, my 2 bits worth.
This is another topic altogether. It's what makes healthy small groups. The potential dangers of conflict, wrong doctrine, what kind of leadership we need. That's another discussion. I mean, that's another discussion. Yeah.
Just to add, I think we had a more practical problem, when we had a group of 9 or 10. How do you divide them into the 5? Who goes to which group? And then it became a very tricky, sensitive issue as well. So whether is it organic or assigned, so we said, idea, they said, okay, I'll keep to the Zoom big group. So that was a practical issue,
You could swap, so this week
around,
yeah, so yeah. Then people don't feel like, oh, they're in that clique and I'm left out.
Correct. That's right, that was a danger.
Yeah.
No, some are very protective of their group. To split the group in any way is a bad word. They get very angry.
Correct, yeah.
So for adults, you cannot force adults to do anything they don't want to do. That's a given. They force, cannot force. And sometimes it's easier to plant a new group. But again, we try to explain, maybe we have alternate between big and small group. Maybe the makan time, the whole group, something like that. Then when the discussion time, we divide into small groups. So we have to find ways that are less threatening, that will not use the word split or what. That one bad word. So no, our group, we makan together. But then when it's discussion time for better discussion, we divide or what. So we have to find ways of overcoming this. Because I hear this all the time, Silas. I cannot, especially for older churches with groups that have been meeting for a long time. Divide is a bad word, man. They get very upset with you.
No, I think in his case, he's talking about the current situation where only 5 can meet. So you can't have the whole group eat together.
Can I? If some family got 5 people, then 5 come to the house. So what my wife said, to rotate, so nobody feels left out.
True, that's true. We were thinking of drawing lots, random numbers selected, then it becomes more neutral.
I would say drawing lots is in the Bible.
Yeah, it's biblical.
Okay, since you're at it, right? The next question is very related to what you're talking right now, which to summarize the questions, it deals with the problem of formality in church, like how groups are set up formally, or cell groups seems to be. So even your cell group seems to be like a very formal thing. So people, they come because this is my cell group which I'm allocated, and then so they just make a formal commitment to come, but it's then a bit hard to really know people personally and things like that. So how can so sometimes we feel more close to Christian friends outside of our church than inside. Actually, that's the case for me also. Like, I guess it organically happened, right? But so how do we deal with this issue of like the formal Christian structure, even when it comes to community, like small community?
I think we shouldn't apologize that we have good friends from other churches. I think that's a value in its own. And we respect the wider body of Christ. And having friends from other denomination churches reminds us there's a wider body of Christ. In terms of cell groups that Bernice and I have led, if people come to cell group because pastors scold you, you must go to a group. They won't last very long. They probably come because of the food at the end or something like that. But and again, my point is, what is the difference between the small group and the big group? The big group is for instruction and all that. So if the small group is also like a Bible study, but there's no relational connection, then why the small group? Sunday I can get that already. So many small groups actually turn out to be Bible study. The focus is on content rather than sharing our stories. So the groups that Bernice and I lead, we normally start with what we call checking in. Everybody share one joy and one struggle in their life. This is a jump start to have a snapshot of what's happening in your life. So since the last time we met, one joy and one struggle. So it cuts away the superficiality, I know a bit more about you. So it's a very simple exercise. And nobody is forced to say anything they don't want to share. Adult group cannot force one. But you as a leader, of course, must model. So since last time, my mother was not well, or I had a promotion, or what. And if people don't like one joy, one struggle, too intimidating, I would say share one prayer item and one Thanksgiving item. Same thing, same thing, but depends what language they are more comfortable with. Then I think we should still do the Bible study, but I'm not obliged to go through the 10 questions of chapter 6. So people feel so the Bible study becomes a master rather than a servant. So the chapter normally got more questions than you need one. They give 10 questions. So we have no time to share because now only question 6 only. Now must finish all the questions. That 11 o'clock time to go home already. So I would be quite judicious, maybe choose 5 questions or whatever, but strong emphasis on application and relevance. Then the sharing and prayer time, what Bernice and I normally do is divide the guys and gals differently. So the guys will go one corner, another room, the girls go in corner. Sometimes some things you die before you admit before the other gender, especially if your wife is there, what die. So we divide into boys and girls, and then Bernice and I would try to bring out what are the struggles, what is it. So they see the CG not just as another learning platform, but as a place where I share stories and receive and share encouragement with one another. So the exercise of one joy, one struggle at the start, the study, which is very concerned for application and relevance, not just content, and the sharing and prayer time, we divide into boys and girls, where there be someone in each of the genders to try to bring out how people are doing and pray for each other. So people would begin to see that as a place where, I tell you, in Singapore, you can go for months and years without anybody really knowing you. We all connect very superficially at work or even in church. So I'm hoping that this will be a place where they begin to find, hey, actually people take time to listen to me. So to give the gift of listening, I tell you, it's so rare in our busy and noisy society. So I'm hoping that kind of culture will make people want to come to the cell group. But like I said, some people will not want to come for whatever reason. But so that there is a clear distinction again between the big group and the small group. Small group is where we begin to connect and share our stories. And indeed, once they get connected, they may actually connect outside the group meeting. So the first loyalty is to the group. And once they get to know each other, then they will be committed to the people in the group. And then we find that, hey, you are moving house next week, can I go and help you or not? So all these things happen outside the group already. So then it becomes a real community. So commitment to the activity is stage 1. Commitment to the people is stage 2. Commitment to the people's lives is stage 3. Then it becomes community. It's not just, pastor say must come for CG, so I come like that. That one will not. So we see how to help our cell groups in church become a true community. And whether a cell group can be rescued or not, I don't know. But this is what we try to do with the groups that we have been privileged to lead.
I think what I take from that is that how it's important to distinguish the purpose of the big and the small group. I think sometimes the small group the Bible study thing we become too focused on Bible study. We forget that we're doing the Bible study together. Yeah. So and I guess it means that maybe we can participate by being the facilitating is very important. Yeah. So I hope that's something that's something I take away from that.
Let Bernice share, because her group has been very inclusive. She has made the group a safe space for all sorts of people. Let me hear from my dear wife.
Yeah, so Suin mentioned earlier about a cell group that actually has broken up into small 3-2-1 groups, meaning these groups of 3, they meet not just in the cell, but they meet outside as well. So I always felt that cell is for sharing life. With our foundation, I mean, we're undergirded by the word, but it's for sharing life. Otherwise, what's the difference between cell and the main big service, right? So if you're going to share life, you have to get to know each other. So you have to encourage people to, Gabriel, you're right, the facilitator is very important, but also empowering people. So you have to, sometimes you could nudge them along and say, hey, 3 of you look like you're hitting it off. I watch you every week. And why don't you guys continue to meet outside? So in my case, there was one cell group where there were 3 of us who were single moms at that point in time. I was widowed before God blessed me with this man that you see before you now. But yeah, so three of us were single moms, and so naturally we found that we shared very similar struggles, sometimes similar joys as well. So we naturally formed a 3-2-1 group. So outside of the cell, we continued to meet because I guess we had needs that the others were not so familiar with, and we could help each other. That didn't mean that we became a small clique that was separate and special, and you guys aren't part of it. No, there were times when we would cross help each other. That there were networks that crisscrossed within the cell group, but empowering people to share lives beyond the cell, I think that's important.
Thank you, Bernice, for sharing that. And um, yeah, I think learning how to empower one another is something that we need to do a bit more to encourage each other to open up and share lives. Yeah. So now I'm thinking a little bit more like how should I lead my youth groups now? Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much, Tan Swin and Bernice, for taking your time to share with us. I know that I know for sure that many of us have learned quite a few interesting and helpful things that we can do that is for our community life, our communal life, living life together. So thank you so much. I hope for all of you also to be able to take home the things and that the things that you all learned today will bear fruit.